Hello and welcome to this week's episode of John's Garage. This week we're here with this absolutely fabulous Lancia Appia. This is a second generation Appia, a car built by Lancia during the 50s and 60s. I want to start off with two thank yous. First of all to the owner of this absolutely fantastic car, and second of all to Carton House, who've allowed us to come here and film this car today. Anyway, let's get on with it. Let's have a good chat about this car and a really deep look at a lot of the interesting features on it. Okay, so what is a Lancia Appia? Well, there's about 28,000 units produced overall by Lancia over about a 10-year period and 6 different generations. This particular one is a second generation, and it differs from the original generation at the rear end by being more of a modern saloon type body style. The original was a little bit more sloping at the back, but that unfortunately impacted rear headroom. Underneath the bonnet, we've a very interesting engine. It is a 1.1 litre or 1100cc V4 configuration. So very unusual, but very advanced for the time. Also, it was built around the Lancia engine, which kind of dates back to the 1917, and obviously they've been working on it through various different generations and different evolutions, and this is the one for 1958. What else have we got underneath the bonnet of this car? It was hugely interesting. Number one, just to point out, this is a South African import originally, was brought into the UK, and from the UK it was sold to Ireland. But being a South African import, that means there's no heater. That simplifies what's going on underneath the bonnet though greatly. There's no pipes, there's no heater matrix, and so on and so forth, and heater fan box and all that. So that's all missing. It means it's a lot easier to get in and access the engine and the electrical components to work on the car. Now, the owner of this car purchased it just at the start of, well, let's say the first COVID lockdown. And they decided that, I suppose, for the sake of their marriage and mental well-being, they'd be better off to retreat to the shed for a couple of years, build their Lancia, and then take their better half away for a beautiful trip to Italy. And that's exactly what they'd done. So get this, folks, when the owner was finished at the end of lockdown rebuilding this car and doing everything they needed to do with it, themselves and their wife set into it and drove from Ireland all the way to the original factory in Turin. And even better than that, they drove back. They spent 3 weeks touring Europe in this car. They had 0 faults. It used 0 oil. It lost 0 coolant. There was 0 reasons to keep going. It just kept going. Such is a testament originally to Lancia's build quality, but of course the work the owner did on the car as well. So we're going to pop that bonnet and we're going to have a little look at what's going on underneath it. Okay, folks, so you are very welcome to the under bonnet of the Lancia Aprilia. Now, what exactly are we looking at under here? Well, let's go through a couple of the features. We have our air intake up here. We have our brake oil reservoir. Interesting point to note, it takes vegetable oil. Not anymore, the owner has changed it, but originally from the factory, it would have been vegetable oil you would have used in this. Screen wash, ignition coil. We have a solenoid here for the headlamps. So the owner tells you when you turn on and off the headlamps, this gives a great big click as it engages. And underneath here, we have our fuse board for the car. You'll note missing, as I already pointed out, is the heater and everything to go along with the heater system, being a South African import, okay? Now, a couple of interesting things under here. So first to note is actually the suspension system at the front of this car, okay? It's independent front suspension, but it's called a sliding pillar setup. So what on earth is a sliding pillar? Well, essentially what you have is the wheel hubs are attached to a sliding pillar and they have shocks and they're spring loaded. So essentially the hub moves up and down the sliding pillar, okay? So it isn't that the hub is separate, it's actually that's what moves up and down. Now, interesting to note, there is a hydraulic dampening setup on this car. I'm going to show you how this works. So about every 1,000 kilometers, the owner comes around here to this little oil reservoir and they lift up these 2 pins here, lift them all the way up, and then just let go. And that allows the oil to refill back into the shock absorbers, and again strengthens up and tightens up the suspension. So in a way, it's 1950s adjustable suspension. You can also adjust the ride height and the firmness. There's a winter setting and a summer setting. So I asked the owner what was the difference between the 2 settings. So the winter setting is softer. The idea being you're going to be driving on rougher roads, you might be driving through snow, you just want to take the shock out of the suspension. And obviously being Italy in the summer, it gets quite warm. Italians drink too much coffee and they all want to drive like maniacs and like they're on the racetrack. So you firm up your suspension so that you can hug those turns and go around the turns quite fast. Now, we've driven this car already, and I can tell you the handling from this suspension is incredible. For anyone who's ever driven a 1950s, 1960s British car, this thing is a revelation. I actually have been quite shocked by how good this is, but we'll talk about that when we're actually out driving it, okay? Again, made in Italy, made in Turin, okay, or Torino, I should say, made in Torino by Lancia company, Lancia ANSI, so is stamped underneath the bonnet here. Now, one other interesting feature I want to point up here. So modern cars make this big deal about adjustable air intakes and being able to adjust the airflow and stuff like that. Lancia have that built into this car. So at the front here is a little solenoid, and it pushes out as the car warms up. And what it does is it rotates up these fins. So it essentially pushes this out. These fins open and close to aid or adjust the cooling, the airflow into the radiator. So on a hot day, you get more. If the car starts to overheat in traffic, you get more airflow. And if it's cold weather, it dampens it, it closes down so that less air flows. And of course, the car warms up that little bit faster. One other interesting point to note, as I said, this is a V4 engine. It's 1.1 litre, 1100cc Lancia V4. But if you're looking down at the top, you can see the two banks of cylinder heads off to each side. But if you look in the center, you can see the spark plugs are staggered. Okay, they're staggered along in two different lines, two cylinders at each side. It's just a very interesting setup. It's not something you'd see in a modern car, but of course, this is how Lancia did it back in the day with their engines. Interesting to note as well, and a point worth noting before anybody says Lancia and Fiat, they're the same thing. They were not the same thing at this point. They were not the same company until 1974. This is independent Lancia engineering, and it's how it was done at the time. One other interesting thing to note underneath here is the polished radiator fan. Okay, so it's a hand polished radiator fan. There is a grease nipple at the top of the fan, and Lancia are very clear. You are not to use normal grease. Again, just like the brake reservoir here, you have to use vegetable oil. And the reason for that was the grease that you would inject in here would make its way into the engine and would have to be burned through it, and also could enter the coolant as well, and had to be able to flow out and stuff like that without blocking. Sorry, it was the coolant it would enter. It had to be able to flow in the system without blocking up the radiator. Obviously, that would cause head gasket failure and other running issues. Anyway, let's jump inside and have a little look around the inside of this car. Okay, so just before we jump inside, there's a couple of things I wanted to point out about this particular car. You'll notice the wheels. These aren't original, these aren't standard. These are Dan Gurney Racing American alloys. They're very, very cool. And I asked the owner, why have you got these fitted to the car, considering the rest of it looks so original? And they said, they're my winter tires. I use this car all of the time. He has the original steel wheels. He's had them powder coated and restored. He has all the chrome bezels and chrome hubcaps that go with them. He doesn't want to destroy them during the winter, and I completely understand that. I think this is an absolutely great idea, but I actually think they're beautiful. They're really nice. They're staggered out. They fill up the arches. They look really well on the car, and they give it a nice stance, okay? Next up, Lancia grille, this lovely big shield, lovely sharp edges, quite modern looking, even by modern standards, okay? As far as I'm concerned, this is a beautiful, beautiful grille. Now, I said this was a Series 2 car, but how do I know this is a Series 2 by looking at it? Well, I have a little look here at these running lights, okay? Parking lights down here. They are rectangular in shape. The original ones would have been just a lot smaller, little round ones. Here, these are the parking lights, but they also double up as the indicators. So if you have the parking lights on and you indicate right or left, these will start to flash. Obviously, these are headlamps, nothing unusual there. And of course, we have the lovely big Lancia shield in the center, looking very purposeful. But of course, the bodywork is very swept back, very, very aerodynamic, which was a Lancia trademark all the way back to the 1930s. Now, if you look down the side of the car, you'll see suicide doors as well. And of course, they blend in very well, but very, very solid. I'm going to grab you a shot or two of the shut lines on these. These are incredible, folks. For anyone who's used to Morris Minors and that kind of thing from the 1950s, where you could nearly stick your hand in around the side of the door, the panel gaps here are unreal how tight they are. And I'm going to show you a couple of details with those. So let's jump on around there and have a look at them. Okay, so you're joining me around the driver's side of this Lancia. Now, one thing to note, and I had to confirm this with the owner, there was never any wing mirrors from the factory fitted to this car. So it isn't that they've been left off or they're not there. It goes back to the aerodynamic shape. They just weren't fitted, okay? Now, I did mention these doors, okay? They're suicide or clamshell doors is what they're known as. They can open independently, which means you can open the front one or the rear one. One doesn't have to be open for the other to work, if that makes sense. Now, the first thing you'll notice is these door handles have an absolutely gorgeous finish to them. They're incredibly solid though. This is something, the owner, when they contacted me, said, you won't believe how modern this car feels. And I genuinely can't. You think a Volkswagen Golf is solid. This thing is even better. And I mean that, I'm not just saying it for the camera. Down along here we have a very, very tight shut line, but we also have a rubber gasket in here from the factory that seals it shut. There's no wind noise or anything in this. And as I say, for someone who's more used to driving British cars from the 50s, this thing's a revelation for me in terms of how modern it is, how quiet it is, how refined it is, and the level of the attention of detail. So anyway, let's open up the driver's door and we'll have a little look. So you pull the handle forward like that and open she pops. But this is one of the things I wanted to show you, is look at how well sealed that rubber gasket. So you have the rubber gasket, but then you also have this trim down along here, which seals it really, really tightly shut. It's incredible. You then on the inside have a lovely little door pull, but, and I'll get a clean shot of this as well, if you look at the window winder, this folds away so it doesn't catch the driver's knee as they're driving, and it works perfect. And again, only the driver's side has that, but it's just so solid. Down along the side then you have these chrome strips fitted to it. Again, lovely little finishing details to it. And of course inside, lovely big bench seat, very, very comfortable. Anyway, just to show you as well before I move forward, the rear door, again, great big solid chrome handle, opens up and your rear passengers can enter. Anyway, let's jump inside and have a look at it in there. One other point to note is just how far forward the front wheel is. Now I was discussing this with the owner, I actually can't get over it. It just reminds me of a Mini. It is so far forward to the car. It just gives it such grip and poise on turns, it's incredible. But anyway, enough about the outside, let's jump inside. Okay folks, you're very welcome to the inside of the Lancia. So I just want to show you this absolutely gorgeous door pull on this car. So you use that, you close the door, you shut it. Now as you can see, the driver's knee is right beside the window winder. So as you can see, the driver's knee is right beside the window winder. So Lancia were quite clever. They created a fold away window winder so that you're not banging your knee on it as you're getting in and out. And of course, to open the door, there's a great big door handle here which you can use. You just give it a tug and open the door goes. Anyway, last thing on the door, you can tell I'm quite fascinated by the door here, is the quarter light. There's a lovely little locking system on it, but more so than that, it actually tugs at the window and seals it right against the gasket. So again, there's no airflow unless you want it, and I'm going to leave that open because I quite like it there. Now, we're going to start on the far left, okay? This great big knob here is actually a pull-out ashtray. I think that's absolutely fascinating, real sign of the times. The lockable, and I mean lockable, okay, glove box, you just push in the button and this is full of little bits and pieces, nods and ends from the owner. Great big Lancia badge up here to remind you what you're driving as well. And of course the A with the arrow here for Appia as well on the steering wheel. And your little horn here as well. I'm just going to give someone a little fright there as they're going by. Next up, what else have we got? We have a column mounted gear change. So it's 4-speed and reverse on the column here. So you just wind your way through the gears, and as you'll see when I'm driving the car, it's really, really simple, really, really light and really easy to use. Okay, so we're going to move to these 5 big knobs here in the center of the dashboard. What on earth are they? Okay, first one, window wipers. First one is washer fluid pump, so you can give that a tug and send up the washer fluid. Second one is your wipers on off. Third one is the fuel pump for starting the car to activate the fuel pump. Next up we have dash lights, and then this one to activate the headlamps. You pull it out and turn it once to the right, and then pull it further and turn it to the right again, and you get your headlamps. So you can have parking lights and headlights, but of course you have to remember to turn it off then. Next up down here, your handbrake is an umbrella pull. You pull and twist and it locks in position. There's a push button and key start on this car. So what does that mean? Well, you put the key in the ignition, turn it 180 degrees and then push it, and then all of a sudden your car will start up, okay? And final thing to note here in the dashboard is your indicator switch on the right hand side. okay? Very, very handy to have there. And of course, also push it forward to activate your full headlamps. Clutch, brake and accelerator pedals on the ground. Now, you might be looking at the interior in here and saying, God, it's not very luxurious in a way, in that it's all rubber mats and rubber liners and all that. But don't be fooled. In the back, it's all carpet lined, so your passengers can travel in comfort. And the driver, because they'll be in and out quite often, they get rubber mats, obviously, to catch all that dirt. The final thing to note is down here by the driver's knee, and again on the passenger side, there's two little boxes there for putting your odds and ends into. And lastly, but not leastly, the last thing I'd like you to show you here is your rear view mirror, which is adjustable for night and day vision. And of course, you push this tab here and it slides the glass inside this lovely chrome holder. Okay, folks, so let's jump in this and take it for a drive, okay? How you going, folks? You're very welcome to the Lancia Appia test drive. Now, you probably notice it's dead silent. I haven't turned on the car because I want to run you through the starting sequence. So, key into the ignition, turn it 180, and then push. And that's it. Lovely and smooth. She's ready to go. Okay, first gear. Oh, just conked a little bit in me. So, there we go. So first gear, forward and up. Handbrake, here's the umbrella. So you just pull it towards you and then push it away. And that's it. Off we go. Now, before anyone points out, John, you're on the road, you have no seatbelts. There's no seatbelts fitted to this particular car. So it encourages you to drive, I suppose, more carefully and consideratively of those around you, okay, and the conditions especially. So there's a good lock on the steering. On we go. So first gear, we're clear to go. Clutch in, pull her down, and you got second gear, and it's as simple as that to use a column change. And of course, third and fourth, reverse. To find reverse, you go into neutral, push the gear stick away from you, and then down, and that gives you neutral. Now, driving it, you probably notice I'm hitting bumps already, and this was one of the most amazing things for me in this car. You hear no squeaks, you hear no rattles, you hear no bangs, you don't see the suspension clogging away. Let this gentleman. There's somebody, folks, I was letting him go past at a zebra crossing, and he is so eager to see the car, he actually waved me on. Anyway, what was I saying? Back to what I was saying. There's no clunks, there's no bangs. It's not bouncing along the road like an old Morris Minor or something like that would be, a Riley or something from the 50s. You have to remember, folks, this is 50s technology. This is post-World War. This is as good as an Italian maker could make, and it really has stood the test of time well. Like even the panel gaps in the internal, they're absolutely brilliant. Like there's no gaps, there's no space. The bezels are all here. They're all original. Now they've been rebuilt by the owner. So as I said, this was a lockdown project. He went through everything on this car and rebuilt it as best, but as originally and I suppose consideratively of the car's age and condition. Now, they did make a couple of upgrades to it. So one of the things they upgraded was the ignition coil. They fitted it with a unit. I'll try and find a link for it and I'll put it in the description if anyone's interested in it. But essentially it gives them a Bluetooth connection to their phone, and they can set different settings on the engine. They can check if the car has been driven. They can actually set an immobilizer on it. They can also check the timing of the engine and so on and so forth. Down to the second gear. And they can make adjustments to it. They can up the performance, they can retard the performance, and so on and so forth. So it makes the car much, much easier to live with and on a daily basis. They've also installed Bluetooth. They've installed different connections for sat-nav and stuff like that, but it's all hidden. You can't see anything. And of course, the reason they did all of this was to make it usable on a daily basis, and also so they could find faults. If there was any running issues, they could test the diagnostics from the engine and see exactly what was going on. But if you lift the bonnet, if you sit in here, you're not going to know any of that, okay? Now, the other smart thing, which I like what they've done, is they've got an immobilizer fitted through this use of this technology. So when they leave the car parked, it's immobilized. There's nothing you can do to it. You can't start it. It won't start. It'll turn over, it'll give a kick, and then it'll die. And it'll stay doing that until you kill the battery. And I actually just thought it was amazing, especially for a car like this. Now, the owner uses it pretty much every day, but a lot of people would leave a car like this parked up for a little while in storage, and they might be weeks on end before they'll actually get to see it. Now, ride comfort and handling, we're going to talk a little bit more about when we get out on the road. But for now, the view, the visibility, the technology, everything is really good in this car. Now, one thing that does, I suppose, betray its age really is the brakes. Non-servo assisted, drums all around. You have to think about your braking before you're doing it. You have to plan in advance. So that means, although the owner might be a bit braver than me in terms of getting close to other traffic and keeping up with other traffic, as the test drive revealed, you do need to be conscious of braking distance and the conditions around you when it comes to it. Now, owner was very clear. It's one finger shifting. That's how easy this gearbox is to live with. Accelerate up, and again, up into third. We're at 40 kilometers an hour. I've seen the owner go well over 100 kilometers an hour in it. It's a 4-speed. You get a little bit loud, but then you shift down to fourth and it settles down. There's no problem keeping up with modern traffic. There's a nice 90-degree angled bend coming up here. And again, the car's well capable of doing it, but it's not my car, so I don't want to test the limits of it. But we're going to go down to third gear. We're going to hug the bend. It doesn't let go, okay? It grips, it grips, it grips. And as I said to the owner when he was driving it, it reminded me a little bit of, for those familiar with a 2CV or maybe a Renault 4, it might lean in turns, but it just doesn't give up. It doesn't even squeak, it doesn't lose track, it doesn't do anything, it just grips. Now, for me, this car has been nothing short of a revelation. It's going to close the quarter light, doesn't stop wind noise coming in. For me, this car is a revelation. I can't actually believe it's a 50s car. And I'm not just playing that up for the camera. I actually mean that. It handles so well, it rides so well. There's no wind noise, there's no drafts. Now, a lot of this is testament to the Lancia build quality. I'll also add it's testament to the reconstruction that was done in it. I don't want to say a full restoration, but certainly a partial restoration. The owner said they spent a lot of time taking parts off and making sure that they lined up well, so it looked well, so that air wasn't escaping in. But again, it all goes back to the original build quality, the fact that the owner, what is this car? 50 plus 20, 70 years old. The fact that they actually could do something like this, and the fact that it was possible to do it as well. So you can see we're going into turns. You got to think you're braking, but the handling, there's no issues with the handling. Now the owner tells me they take this on to Lancia meets and they keep up with, we'll say, more powerful Lancia cars, or cars that you would suspect would actually be considerably more powerful than it. Now you might wonder, it's 1100cc, it's a V4, what actual power is coming out of it? To the best of my knowledge, it's 48 horsepower, but it doesn't feel like that. It weighs very little. It's very, very sharp handling. And don't forget, as I said, that suspension is adjustable. It can be firmed up for different settings. There is a certain amount of adjustment the driver can do in this car to make sure it handles as well as you like. And of course, it's got a wider track as well with those alloys fitted, so it can handle. Now the steering, lovely and light, no issues, no vagueness. It's quite sharp. If you turn that wheel, the car is turning. Dial's lovely and clear. There's a beautiful font on them. Yeah, all in all, as I say, I'm more used. My benchmark is 50s British cars or 60s British cars. This is streets ahead of them. This must have actually been, for anyone who drove it at the time, a revelation in comparison to what else was out there. Now I asked the owner, what was the British equivalent? Again, I'm just going back to what I'd be more familiar with. What was the British equivalent of this car? In my head I was thinking Riley, something like that. They actually said no, it was Jowett. It was more low volume production of a specialist car that was probably way ahead of its time. For those of you who don't know them, I advise you go look them up. Really, really innovative maker, but unfortunately they folded before their time. And not a little bit like Lancia, but Lancia are still going. In fact, I suspect Lancia are about to go through a resurgence. And you might think I'm insane saying that, but I'm not, because there's big plans for Lancia. Lancia is going to become an electric car maker. It's going to be specialist and it's going to be luxury. And I think things are actually going to turn a corner for them. It's my own feeling on it. But anyway, with that, huge thank you to the owner for inviting me up to their place and for letting me take their very, very special Lancia out for a drive and for a look around and for sharing it with you guys. And please, if you want your cars featured, contact me. If you have a collection you'd like featured, contact me. If you have a garage with interesting cars for sale, contact me. I just want to show the public what's out there in Ireland and keep a little record of it for the future as well, so that people can look back when they're all stuck in their electric milk floats, looking at what we had access to back in the day. And anyway, with that, thank you very much for watching John's Garage. Make sure to subscribe, make sure to like it, and please make sure to share it and let people know this small little Irish channel is here sharing classic and interesting cars in Ireland. Adios folks, bye bye.